Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. So here's a knife that I have not messed with before, a knife brand that I have not messed with or handled any of their products before. This is the CJRB Rampart. And if you're not familiar, CJRB is a subsidiary, is that the right word? Company of Artisan Cutlery, which is a fairly large and fairly reputable company, although both of these companies are from mainland China, which is currently run by the CCP. And anyways, I'm not going to go too much into that this video. If you want to hear me ramble about that more, you can check out my fairly recent unboxing of the QSP Penguin, which I kind of rambled on about that more than I needed to. So I'll keep that to a minimum during this one. Just know that typically I don't like supporting these companies and these knives. Not anything against the people or the individuals. I'm sure they're great, and I'm sure they're just looking to do their job and support their families. You just never know exactly what you're supporting and what you're paying for when you support a country with so much secretive bullcrap going on, where they're suppressing their people and other countries and other governments and all that stuff. So without any further ado or relatively uneducated political ramblings from myself, we're going to talk about this knife, the Rampart from CJRB. So this is not an unboxing. I actually unboxed this a couple of months ago when I picked it up from Atlantic Knives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. That is the Atlantic Canadian kind of hub for, well, it's the only real big city in Atlantic Canada. And this is also where our largest knife store in the east coast of Canada. So when I picked up the CJRB Rampart, I also grabbed the QSP Penguin. Two of these knives that I typically would never buy, but bought from my local knife store to kind of make myself feel better about my purchase. And they're two very similarly priced knives, both in D2, both kind of in that same rough size and blade profile. Now, the blade to handle ratio on this thing definitely gives it a very unique look, where the Penguin is a little bit more of your typical folding knife profile. But this Rampart, it caught my attention. I seen Metal Complex do his review of this, or overview, back some point last summer, I believe. And I don't know how long this has been out. I don't think it's that old of a knife. When I seen this in the thumbnail, it just took me off guard, because it does look like a very, very unique, giant, weird cleaver of a folding knife. The handle's very, very simple, but actually very, very comfortable and easy to move around and reposition. The finger choil here is a big seller. That is a nice finger choil. Also kind of doubles up as a sharpening choil, which makes this Wharncliffe blade incredibly easy to sharpen. I would assume. I haven't used it much yet. What isn't going to be easy to sharpen is the D2 steel, which I haven't spent a whole lot of time sharpening because I haven't used it a ton. You got on the blade printed the serial number, the D2 blade steel, and China, which of course is different from your typical cheap made in China, because while this is, like I mentioned, not a knife that I would typically ethically approve of buying, this is very much a good quality Chinese made product. How it's made and the practices and procedures of how it's made are a totally different story. So now the materials and the fit and finish of this are definitely put together as well as any high quality knife that I've ever held. And whatever they're doing over there, they're certainly able to make these knives come out feeling like something closer to $100 and $150 knife. Whereas this is only 30 to 35 American for, this is, I believe, I was going to say FRN, but as I looked at this, I realized, no, that looks fancy. Is that? And it really is. It's carbon fiber. I had to look it up. These are carbon fiber scales and D2 steel on a $35 American knife. I think I paid around $45, $50 for this, and you're going to find it anywhere from that like $35, $40, $50 range on most websites in Canada. If you want to get the copper scaled version, you're going to pay probably about 20 bucks more. So I think somewhere's around like 80, 70 bucks Canadian, maybe 60, 70 American. But it's got this fairly deep carry pocket clip. It's got that extra point coming out where the lanyard loop is, which is actually a very good spot for a lanyard loop hole. And really, it's not that big of a deal. It still does carry quite well in the pocket. I've carried this a little bit, but it still isn't something I've found in my pocket a lot. The Torx heads on this appear to be, yeah, of course, your T6 for your pocket clips. Tip up carry only. And I'm seeing, looks like T6 for the pocket clip screws, although fairly deep T6 heads, and the same for the body. And that looks like a T8 for the pivot, although I could be slightly wrong on that, and my tool is not right next to me. And yep, T8, there we go. So it is your pretty standard, could be larger, but still okay, Torx heads for the body and pivot. As far as other hardware, I don't see anything. You've got a blow-through design with full stainless steel liners, no milling that I can see. You have, what, the barrel spacers in the back here. And if you haven't noticed yet, the smooth action of this bad boy is just about untouchable compared to other $40 to $50 knives. And that is due to the ball bearing, the ceramic ball bearing washers, which gives this thing just ridiculous drop shutting action that I have not ever witnessed myself, let alone from a knife this cheap. This is stuff that you typically would see people do with higher end $400, $500, $600, $700, $8 knives. But that's, yeah, a little bit scary. Part of it's due to the weight of this gigantic freaking Wharncliffe blade. The other big part, of course, is those ceramic ball bearing washers. So pretty impressive, but if you get that gritty and dirty like I typically will with my knives, I'm sure that's not going to work as well. The liner lock operates fairly well. It's got a large cutaway that's fairly easy to access. I'm a little bit cautious when I'm going to close this thing because that could close very quickly. And just because of the size and the cleaverish type profile of that blade, I don't know if you'd want to have your hand anywhere as close to that when it closes on you. So when I close that, I'm very, very cautious to barely nudge that forward. And then just because it's kind of fun, I do a little drop shut on it. And really, that's the most I've played around with it, is just sitting around at my desk, or maybe the couple times I've carried it as a backup, I've fiddled around with it a little bit, have used it a little, and I have played around with cutting some boxes and stuff. It works really well. But like I mentioned in the QSP Penguin video, like I'll mention again in this one, I would much rather have a good, high-quality American or Canadian-made knife in my pocket. And if I'm going to get something from overseas, Cold Steel and their Taiwan factory is doing things about as good as you can do for as low of a cost and still being able to have themselves sleep at night and have their customers be able to sleep at night when purchasing their equipment and their knives. So this isn't something I'm going to use a lot. And if it's stupid, if my reasoning is dumb, you can let me know down in the comments why I should be thinking about knives and not as political conversation pieces. But we might just have to differ on our opinion when it comes to that. Basically, this is going to be a testing, hard use testing knife, and I will see how much this holds up to. Same as the QSP Penguin. This personally isn't going to be a knife that holds a lot of sentimental value to me, or really a lot of value at all. It's pretty high value for the cost. Budget-wise, you've got a killer product for the money asked. How you put this thing together for that cost, I don't know, and I probably don't want to know. So when I do my full review of this knife, eventually I'll give you the full specs and all the details you want to know about this thing, all the variants and all that stuff. This one is going to be mostly an overview where I discuss all the general specs and my just first initial impressions of it, why I bought it, that kind of thing. We'll do a few size comparisons here, and I'll mention as well, this is about 4 ounces, this knife. So fairly heavy, but not nearly as heavy as like a lot of your Cold Steels. Somewhere's raw, but a little heavier than say like a in between a Mannix 2 and a Paramilitary 2, which, what a good spot to start the size comparisons off with. So we've got the Paramilitary 2, which right-hand Spidey flick always challenges me. And there is the Mannix 2. And weight-wise, this is sitting about 4 ounces, where I think this is a little over 3, and this is right around 5. So pretty damn close in size. I'd say closer to the Paramilitary 2 in overall profile and thickness. And if you look at the QSP Penguin, they're actually very similar in blade length and usable blade edge, maybe about 1/4 of an inch or less extra on the Rampart, and a lot more extra handle, but really they fit in the hand very similarly as far as what's actually in my hand. But I have a large size hand, but not very huge hands. If you've got big old mitts on you, this might be a little too small, and this might give you the extra room that you need. And I will say this does fit phenomenally in the hand. And as far as like a fighting or defensive knife, for what little I know about that stuff, I gotta say it feels really good. I don't know that a flipper, and some people will argue very much with me on this, I don't know that I like flippers for defensive stuff. I feel like it's more likely to fly out of my hand than a thumb stud or thumb hole opening. But anyways, I think this thing would be a phenomenal say defensive tool if you needed it to be, relative to a lot of EDC stuff that's out there. The Wharncliffe blade's great. You're going to get crazy penetration, and like Michael Jansen has discussed in his testing, the Wharncliffe blade is ideal for getting maximum slicing into fleshy targets. So yeah, the finger choil here is great for hand protection, and you got a fairly good grip on this thing, but definitely not great if you got slippery or full of say oily liquids on your hands or whatnot. But just briefly on that topic, I will say there's worse things out there you could have in your hand if you had to defend yourself from whatever. And let's look at a couple of Benchmades. How about the brand new, to me, Super Freak M4 Freak from Benchmade. which is quite a bit bigger and heftier, but then more the size of the Rampart is the 940-2. Then why don't we look at, let's see, what's the number one classic, or number one and number two most classic size comparisons ever? How about the Rat Model 1, I was going to say number 1, but technically Model 1, and the Model 2, which is also in D2, like this Rampart here. And what else we got here? How about some cold steel on the table? Let's bring that Luzon back out. You can see that nice long lengthy Luzon next to that weird long handled Rampart. And we'll make a sandwich out of that with the SR1 not so light. And last size comparisons, we'll give you a little bit of fixed blade love in case that's a little bit more up your alley. Here's the Bradford Guardian 3 without that lanyard loop, a lot smaller than this CJRB Rampart. And how about the SE Azula 2? And why not just add a third? We're gonna throw the Toray Anaconda in there just for its good looks. And there is some good fixed blade size comparisons if you're more of a fixed blade EDC type person. That just about sums up everything I wanted to say about this knife. If you liked this video, feel free to give it a like. I'd appreciate that. And feel free to check out some other content that's going to be popping up to the right of your screen here shortly. The Rampart's a pretty cool knife. Maybe not something I prefer to carry and not something I'll be using a ton, but you'll definitely see me beat this thing up in the future, so look forward to that. For now, this is the Hard On Gear channel signing off.